Hey, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about our favorite and least favorite World of Warcraft expansions and the lessons we think the developers can learn from each expansion and how they can add that to Shadowland to make sure it's a successful expansion.
Uh,
Today, I'm joined, as always, by Joey, my brother.
hey, how's it going?
So, all right. So, how did you want to start this off, Joey? We were. Did you want to go
Well, obviously, I think we
by?
should start from the beginning with Burning Crusade.
Oh, okay. Well, actually, before you go into this, how did you rank these? Like, what were some criteria that you went through when you were thinking about each expansion and kind of where you think you would rank them?
Well, I did it a lot around the zones. I
Oh,
feel like
okay.
level zones and like the kind of design that goes into them,
Mhm.
as well as just how fun it is to play on them.
Mhm.
Uh, Obviously, the I think a lot of it goes into also the dungeons and raids that were added, the
Mhm.
races or classes that were added. Uh, Overall, the playability of it too, how fun it was to level, how it felt to be max level, and how long that max level could actually hold my attention.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah.
Things along those natures.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, my criteria.
Speaking,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, I was going to say starting that off, but if you have criteria, you
Oh,
should probably go on that
yeah.
first.
Mine's a little bit. What do you call it? Larger. Like I didn't go as individualized as like each zone, and some zones kind of obviously stick out, but I went more of like an overall theme of the
Hmm.
expansion and how the theme kind of worked. If it kind of melded together, and sometimes when it doesn't meld together, that's still okay. Um, like the first expansion we're going to be going over. But I think the theme of kind of the zones and how they flow, how the entire expansion feels, and kind of what not necessarily aesthetic, but what feeling the developers were trying to get you to feel while you were
Yeah.
going through the zones is really important. And then obviously,
Yeah, well, shit, that's a lot more succinct than mine, but yeah, sure.
no, well, I mean, but and then mine is, and then obviously because I'm a lore nerd, the story is super important. So
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I
And
yeah.
I think that's a lot of times things that are like overlooked in World of Warcraft, where people might have a problem with the game necessarily on some aspects of it, but the story that the developers were trying to put forward was really, I think, sometimes overlooked by the players.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree with you there. Um, but yeah, besides that, I'm on board. How long the content can hold your attention, all that stuff. But
Mhm.
so go ahead. You could start us off on Burning Crusade.
Well, I was just going to say, I think Burning Crusade started a path for World of Warcraft that would made it more like thematic, more cinematic, where
Hmm.
going in your first time going into Burning Crusade, you go into the Dark Portal,
Mm-hmm.
and really that Dark Portal is probably the largest, at least on the Outland side, is one of the largest structures I feel like you've seen up to that point, aside from like
Yeah.
full blown cities. Like things massive,
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
and just the whole, you show up. Burning legions rushing the gate, like people are. It's just it feels like you're actually entering a battle scene, and I think it's something they obviously get better at throughout the expansions. But
Mm-hmm.
this was really a great way to start it off. Whereas I feel like uh, vanilla, there might have been some thematic elements in like epicness uh, for like the Scarab Gate and going into Encourage and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. But I think they really started off well. Show up, it's a complete wasteland. Hellfire Peninsula is great in that respect, where
Mm-hmm.
you feel like you're just really in hell.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree. And when I was kind of thinking about all these expansions, I was thinking about how you know, Burning Crusade is kind of like Vanilla 2. Like I think
Yeah.
after Burning Crusade and when you get into Wrath of the Lich King, you really have more of a linear story for each
Yeah, definitely.
expansion. Whereas
Hmm.
Burning Crusade, we go there, but we get there and we're not exactly sure what we're supposed to be doing. We just know, oh no, now there's these fell orcs now. What are we supposed to
Yeah.
do with that? And then, we go to each zone and they each kind of have their own purpose and there's not really an overarching plot. Like it's not like in Wrath of the Lich King, we got invaded by Scourge, so we went to Northrend to kill the Lich King. We didn't go to Outland to kill Illidan or to come back to Azeroth and kill Kil'jaeden.
Uh-huh.
We kind of just went there because it was a new place to go.
Yeah.
Um, but I think you're totally right. I give the developers a lot of credit for what they were able to pull off in the Burning Crusade.
Yeah,
Um,
and I remember when we first, many, many years ago, when we first got Burning Crusade, I remember we were just on vanilla and we saw like a video of, must have been like a Doomguard or something, and they
mhm.
were fighting. It's like, that guy's like the size of like four characters stacked on top of each other. Whereas
Yeah,
before then, really the largest character you saw, I mean, aside from maybe like raid bosses or something, but just random people walking around, maybe an ogre was probably the largest thing you
yeah,
saw.
yeah,
And then now you have like giant fell death machines that like, and I thought that was really, really cool having the what was it, that Fell Reaver, the
yeah.
Doom
The Fell
Reaver,
Reaver. Yeah,
Fell Reaver, just walking around as just a boss that will just like, oh shoot, like I'm in the middle of a quest, but I kind of have to back out because this thing's about to step on me.
yeah. No, I I think you're totally right. They don't really have that in modern WoW that much anymore, but it definitely introduced a feeling of, this isn't your backyard. Like this
Yeah,
is somebody else's place, and you're just trying to survive it. Like I I,
yeah.
I kind of think of the Burning Crusade as the Wild West, and
Hmm.
part of my thing is there's not a cohesive theme across Burning Crusade. It's kind of its own little pocket stories, but it
Yeah,
does it really well because you feel like you're in a wilderness, like a foreign land, which
hmm,
I think Warlords of Draenor kind of captured as well, but I
yeah,
feel like Burning Crusade did it a little better because it really felt like, there are people here that were here before we got here, but you know it felt more like a wasteland, like going through, I don't know, Netherstorm
oh yeah,
or
yeah,
Shadow Moon Valley, or even Zanger Marsh. It's like, oh, there's little mushroom people, but the vast majority of Zanger Marsh, they're just monsters trying to kill you. And so I I uh, I think it lacked a little bit of focus, but for some reason for Burning Crusade, I don't necessarily hold it against it like I would later
yeah. I mean,
expansions.
definitely across the whole expansion, it wasn't as focused.
Hmm.
But I feel like within each region was super focused.
Yeah,
You had each faction of the Ildar, the Fell Orcs in Hellfire, the Blood Elves in Netherstorm, and all the other places. It was just very,
yeah,
each area was very tailored to that specific faction of enemy.
yeah. And then they all
And it was
kind of
another kind of,
go ahead. Sorry.
it was another interesting thing kind of going into Burning Crusade, whereas, the last time we'd been in Outland was Warcraft 3.
Hmm.
And you are Illidan and Kael'thas, and so it's kind of weird going in, finding this,
Mm.
quasi empire they built that essentially you built in Warcraft 3, and now you're
Yeah.
kind of on the opposite side of them.
That's really good. I've never thought of it that way, but you're totally right. We're
Mm.
literally going into the world that we had helped build in Warcraft 3.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
even
huh.
Hakama was a character in
Yeah.
Warcraft, if I remember.
Yeah, yeah, he
I
was.
mean,
Yeah.
his texturing was horrible, but it was essentially that idea. It was the broken Draenei that you were
Yeah.
helping.
No, that is so interesting. I have never put that together, but that's really true.
Hmm.
And then in each zone, it's kind of Illidan's agent in that zone. In Zangarmarsh, you got Lady Vash, and Netherstorm, you've got.
Again, another major hero you used in Warcraft
Yeah,
3.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
gosh.
And now that you bring that up, actually, I've always kind of seen like Black Temple should have been the last raid for that
without a doubt.
expansion.
Yeah.
But you know, the whole reason Illidan fled to Outland was to get away from Kill Jaden.
Yeah,
And Kill
that's a good
Jaden
point.
is the final boss of the expansion. So like I've
Hmm.
never put that together, but it
Kind
actually
of
makes
comes full circle.
yeah, we actually address a lot of stuff from Warcraft 3.
Yeah, another thing I
That's
wanted
really
to bring
cool.
up too was
Yeah.
like neutral cities like Shattrath,
Mhm.
whereas that's a huge thing, really. Where if
Yeah.
you look at vanilla, neutral cities was like Booty Bay and like
Yeah, Gadget
like really
Stand.
some
Yeah.
yeah gadgets and some really like just podunk rural places.
Yeah.
Whereas this, it was the center of the map where everyone went there. That was everyone's home. So it was I thought it was an interesting thing. Faction versus faction is always going to be there in World of Warcraft, but it was
Mhm.
more interesting kind of breaking down those lines. And suddenly there's like another way to define yourself. It's like Aldor and Scryer.
Yeah.
Uh, that's, in Shadowlands, I see that that's something that they're going for, and I really like that because you don't really see very much of that in any of the other expansions where you can really differentiate yourself and develop your character story past essentially just alliance or horde.
Yeah, absolutely. They introduced a lot in Burning Crusade that I feel like they could have actually done more with. Like the Aldor Scryer kind of picking a reputation and them representing more than just another reputation that you grind. Like it's actually something
Yeah,
you can you know identify
more
as.
meaningful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, the one thing that always bugged me with
Mhm.
Burning Crusade though is I never and World of Warcraft tries to retcon this a little bit later in Legion when we revive Illidan, but I never
Like most things.
understood why we went to kill Illidan. Like, so I know in Shattrath the whole reason the Scryers are there, and we're getting into a little bit of a lore topic, but that's fine. I'm
I
fine
mean,
to
that's kind
yeah,
of
that's kind of the point. Um,
the.
so Illidan sends an army of allegedly sends an army of blood elves, and the blood elves get to Shattrath, see Adal. Is it Adal? What's his? That's the Naru's name, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Um, and are so overcome with the light that they join Shattrath and become the Scryers, and tell Shattrath that Illidan just tried to send an army to destroy them. And so they decide that they have to destroy Illidan. All right, okay, that makes sense. But that seems like a really
It's pretty
light
weak.
reason to go after and try to kill, Illidan, one of the community's favorite heroes from Warcraft 3. And I always thought that they could spin it somehow and say, oh, kill not kill Jaden. Kael'thas actually sent that army of blood elves and said that Illidan sent them just to start trouble between Illidan and Shattrath while he was actually already working for Kil'jaeden. I thought, something like that. I feel like they could have.
There are better ways to handle it for sure. I
Yeah,
think there's also some animosity between them, uh, because the Blood Elves seized Tempest Keep,
yeah,
and assumingly under Illidan's command.
hmm
But you're right. Whereas you go into Outland with the expectation that it's going to be the Burning Legion is really going to be a Burning Crusade,
yeah,
and really the Burning Crusade is against the Burning Legion's biggest enemy.
yeah,
It's kind of odd.
yeah. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And again, that's really my main knocking point with Burning Crusade is just while the theme is really good, like you have that kind of Wild West feel, the
Hmm.
story is so disjointed that it really starts to take away from it.
And
Um,
it's unfortunate because it had such potential.
absolutely. I'm just gonna go through this list actually of raids now that I'm looking at it. Okay,
Go
listen to
for
all
it.
these raids: Megtheridan's Lair, Grohl's Lair, Serpent Shrine Cavern, Battle for Mount Hyjal,
God,
Karazhan,
I forgot that was.
yeah,
Wow, I really forgot.
Zolomon,
I thought that was vanilla.
The Eye,
Solomon too. Wow.
Black Temple, and Sunwell Plateau. That is a ton of raids.
Yeah.
And I know Magtheridan's Lair, Grohl's Lair, and maybe yeah, those two are super short, but I mean Karazhan, the Eye, Black Temple, Sunwell, that like those are all very long raids. And that's super
Yeah, they
surprising to
definitely
me.
didn't shy away from content.
No, no, that's crazy that they had that many raids in the works. Um,
Each one of those raids had about you not all of them, but many of them had two, three, even four side dungeons
yeah,
that were
that's
just
true.
build up to that raid.
Yeah, yeah. No, a Burning Crusade definitely had a lot in terms of content. I mean, this is
Hmm.
also the expansion where they introduced flying, um, and you had the whole Nether Drake side of it that um, kind of a trophy for being such an avid flying person that now you can
Hmm.
fly these Nether Drakes all around. Like yeah, they there was a lot of content in Burning Crusade for sure. Um,
Without a doubt.
they
We
also
should probably move on. Oh, sorry. I was
no
going to
no
say
no
we
that's fine.
should move on to Wrath at some point. I do want to also leave with they had some awesome transmog.
Burning
Like
Crusade.
I to this day wear a lot of Burning Crusade transmogs just because I love the style of a lot of them.
Well, I know you love the what was it, the Demon Stalker set for the Hunter or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked a lot of the Druid sets too, like the priest sets. I feel like there are a lot of kind of maybe undervalued. I mean, I'm not knocking any of the other transmogs, but I feel like definitely the jump from vanilla transmogs to Burning Crusade
Oh,
was huge.
yeah, absolutely. They really accomplished a lot in Burning Crusade. Um,
Hmm.
but now to the Big Daddy itself, Wrath of the Lich King, who many people would probably consider the best expansion ever.
Hmm.
You can start us off on this one too. I'd like to see what you have to say about this one because you never hit max level in Wrath, correct?
No, I essentially was approaching max level, and I think I hit max level right around when Kata came out. So
Okay.
obviously, I'm not that educated in this expansion.
Hmm.
But I will say I really liked. Uh, well, again, going back to Burning Crusade, where you go in expecting a bunch of Burning Legion, and instead you're faced with orcs and Naga and
Hmm.
ogres and Gron and things like that. I really liked that they kept that going in this, where you're going to Wrath the Lich King. It's Northrend, it's Scourge, it's going to be all undead, and that's all it's going to be. But that's
Hmm.
not really what we got. We had the Vikral,
Hmm.
so
Yep.
essentially Vikings. We had Blue Dragon Flight. We had a whole nother group of trolls we had never even seen before. We had those little lizards and the fox things that were in that valley. Like
Oh yeah, yeah. I totally yeah.
it was just very diverse,
Hmm.
very very diverse.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think the I think Blizzard is at their best when they have a lot of freedom. I think like creatively. I think when they go into a space like Outland or really Northrend, we've only seen super small portions of that outside of World of Warcraft. And so when they introduce it into the game, they can really do whatever they want. Um, like creating the Vrykroll, the 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 Tonka, were they the Tauren? The Tuskars,
yes,
fan favorite.
yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah, I forgot.
Yeah,
It literally goes on and on. The
yeah,
the spice giants, it is pretty ridiculous how much stuff is there.
yeah. No, it's really good. And then they had a lot of nostalgia too, because I believe the first raid of Wrath of the Lich King was Naxxramas, um,
Hmm.
which is just a lot of people that was the ending raid in vanilla. But the way vanilla was structured, where you basically had to be uber geared to go to Naxxramas, it offered a lot of players a chance to see it for the first time. Um, but yeah, they managed to take an expansion that was kind of focused primarily on you know the Lich King and the undead and everything we got to fix with that, and managed to spin in Malagos going insane and waging war against Dalaran, um, and then Ulduar and literally Yogg Saron awakening and trying to destroy the world after taking control of his prison. Um, it was a very they had a lot of creative freedom and they really delivered on almost every ground.
Hmm. They
Um,
also continued with kind of building up on how I mentioned before, the thematic big climatic events where
yeah.
Wrathgate. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
I don't think anyone could forget Wrathgate and literally going through and fighting undead and rebels in Undercity. Like
Hmm.
that was just a huge aside. That was
And
pretty cool because Vami
yeah.
Matras, is that evil dreadlord. You always knew he was kind of shady and was going to eventually be a bad guy just from dialogue from him based off how he came into Sylvanas' service in Warcraft 3. It was cool to actually see him finally like betray people and
Hmm.
yeah, it was.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, the thing that really made Wrathgate stand apart so much from really anything that came before it or anything that's come after it is, you know, I think the most similar thing I can think happening would be the War of Thorns, the BFA pre-patch,
Mm-hmm.
where we went and attacked Darkshore. But everybody
And
knew that was happening. Everybody knew that was going
even
to come.
during that though, did anyone really that important die? Like Four Dragon dying was huge. He was essentially the
Yeah,
human faction leader
yeah,
for.
no, yeah, because I was Alliance through all the way until Cataclysm, and yeah, I remember I was like, oh, dude, I remember you were watching after Anduin, and now you're out here fighting with me on the front lines. This is awesome. And no, you're right. After seeing him die, it was like, wow. Like the struggle against the Lich King became a little bit more real
Yeah,
when,
I don't
yeah,
think that a death has been felt that strongly since Varian in Legion and
yeah,
or Varrock in BFA.
yeah. No,
Those
they,
were the big deaths that I feel like probably shook more people than any other.
yeah, and of course, Bolvar comes back, but how much does he come back? How much of it is
It,
him? Yeah,
it's not really like a happy comeback. It was like, oh, well, he's kind of forever in service again,
yeah. I
but this
guess you,
time without even any recognition. Like, I mean,
yeah.
it's kind of his life at this point, but
Hmm.
it's kind of sad.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. We can't really talk about Wrath either without talking about Death Knights, um,
Yes.
the first hero class, the first of two. Um, and this was just, again, going off of the whole theme of Wrath of the Lich King. You know, Death Knight, they could have gone really wrong and just made it like a paladin with dark effects instead of yellow effects. Like, they could have done that easily.
Yeah.
But they go and just make them completely unique. Like, you're a tank, but you don't have a shield. You just have a big sword that you can parry with, and then you can hit back to drain health. Um, like they just, of almost every class in the game, I think Death Knight they've been able to nail the feel
And
for the most
to
part.
this day, Death Knights are
Yeah,
still among the most beloved characters in the game, the
yeah,
most fun. I
hmm,
mean, they're literally the anti-hero.
hmm, yeah. No,
Uh,
I mean, yeah. It's and everybody loves being an anti-hero. Everybody likes being Arthas or whatever. But um, I will always remember going through that first starting quest line, and it was just great. It set it up perfectly into going to Northrend and attacking the Lich King, and even going to your faction capital and like having food thrown at you, having people say get the rope and stuff like that because you were literally an agent of the Lich King.
yeah,
Uh,
you are the bad guy. You
yeah,
just happen to have fallen out of favor with the bigger bad guy.
exactly. Yeah, it's they did a great job with that. Um,
Yeah.
Another thing that Wrath of the Lich King did exceptionally well is I think they've had the best approach to flying of any expansion so far because they had storm peaks and Ice Crown, the two final leveling zones, were built for flying.
Hmm.
Um, and there's a lot of great zones in Wrath of the Lich King. Grizzly Hills was amazing. Zoldrak was great. Dragonblight was incredible. But really, to this day, Storm Peaks is probably it's probably my second favorite zone ever, just because you literally had to fly around to get to do anything there, and it was cool to see a zone that was designed from the ground up to do that, not just, oh, you get to run around, oh, but now you're flying, so now you're just flying over a world built for people to walk on.
Yeah, and it created a cool effect of almost like the ground is lava. Like you can go down to the ground, or at least an ice crown. Like you can go down to the ground, but you just might get swarmed by a
Yeah.
bunch of undead and might not actually be able to get back up in time. So
Yeah.
it definitely helped Ice Crown feel scary, where
Yeah.
it was so infested, so heavily defended, you needed flying just so you didn't die just walking around it.
Yeah, which makes sense. I mean, it's literally the innermost domain of the Lich King. It should probably be impossible to get to unless you just start eking out little victories across the area.
Hmm.
Um, uh, yeah, so I mean, pretty much across the board, all of the raids in Wrath of the Lich King were awesome too.
Hmm.
Nax was great. The smaller raids were great too, like Vault of Arcavon and Obsidian Sanctum. Ulduar, probably one of the best raids ever made. Um,
Yeah, without a doubt.
and then Ice Crown, it even now when I'm farming for Invincible, it's kind of still a joy to go through Ice Crown, ICC, uh, because it just feels like such a good raid. The one raid and the one kind of patch I really didn't like from Wrath of the Lich King, looking back now, is the Trial of the Crusader patch, the uh, the Argent tournament.
Really, it's a surprise hearing you because I remember you used to know life that thing,
Yeah,
just
no, that
days on it. Like,
that was my peak of Wrath of the Lich King, was running Ulduar and then running doing Argent tournament dailies, but I, it was such a distraction, like a distraction from, we just defeated Yogg Saron, like one of the old gods. Now we're preparing to go take on the Lich King, and we're gonna have a little tournament in Ice Crown. Like it just
yeah, it is.
it didn't seem to make a lot of sense. The raid was super short. Like, I even remember, like, my guild would do the raid, and then we'd go back to doing Ulduar because Ulduar was more fun. Um, it was just it.
And just more meaningful.
Yeah.
I feel like if it came out before Ulduar, it would have made more sense
Yes. Yeah. I
because it's kind of
agree.
like you're gearing up for the big end game content, which is essentially what they try to do with it. But you're right, it felt out of place after Ulduar.
Yeah. And yeah, it was just kind of weird, and I get that it maybe bought them more time to work on ICC, which that's totally fine. I'll add that as a benefit that the Argent tournament brought. But I think that was the height of the daily system, where you had to go to a zone, pick up all your quests, do all the quests, and then move on. Um, and just looking back, I mean, I'm looking back. Hindsight's 2020. World quests are just so much better in my opinion.
Oh, without a doubt,
It's
yeah.
just that it's hard to look back favorably on a patch that, like, the biggest thing it did beside add a small raid was add a daily hub. It's kind of like, yeah, is that really worth it? Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I mean, overall, Rattle Lich King, that was the first time I hit max level. Um,
I would counter you going back to that last thing where you said the worst raid was the tournaments.
yeah.
I think the worst raid was the lack of a Zoldrak raid. It, I'm just saying, it was a
Yeah.
whole region. You had two dungeons, and it's like,
Well, they were apparently supposed to do a Zoldrak raid.
and that's the thing that killed me is I forgot which. I think it must have been Zoldrak. or the final dungeon in that region where you see
Gundrak.
the giant snake
Yeah.
slithering around under you, and it's like, okay, that's about the biggest thing I've ever seen in the world,
Hmm.
and yet there's no real explanation as to what it is. There's no like, it just felt weak. Like every other trolls got a raid. Oh,
Well,
except for
except
Sand Fury,
Sand
but
Troll. Yeah.
they're pretty lame. But like every other troll got one, and it's like the Drakari are cool. They're badass. Like they really changed.
Yeah.
Like
They
trolls are
kill their gods to get
savage.
power.
Yeah,
Like that's awesome.
like it kind of defines the trolls. Like if you look at the lore, the trolls are supposed to be really kind of the most savage people out there. Like
Hmm.
their rituals and things. And these guys are the most savage of the most savage people.
Hmm.
And yet you get two dungeons, which one of them is literally just half undead, and then you get one region where again it's about half undead. Uh, I would have loved to see a Drakari raid, but
Hmm.
beggars can't be choosers, I suppose.
No, I see that. Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's tough to fault such a great expansion.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, it did feel like that was an opportunity that they missed, especially because Zoldrak was such a like stylistically, it was just the entire zone was a staircase and
yeah,
tiered levels going up to Gundrak. And
yeah.
for
It
the
was
only thing to be
beautiful.
there is a dungeon seems kind of weird.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that
Winter
dungeon
Spring too.
awesome.
I think
Oh, I totally
was one of
forgot
the
about.
best PvP things in the game. Um, I had never been into PvP, but that zone, you didn't have to be super geared. You could go jump in a vehicle and help win that way. And then if you
Or
did
just
win,
sit on a turret and just blast people all day. That was my. I love doing that.
no, it was great. And then even
Easy
like it,
points.
and if you did win, now you get a raid that you can do. Like that's
Hmm.
it's I loved Winter
Yeah,
Spring. I've always loved the larger scale PvP battles. Like
without a
Alterac
doubt.
is
I'll track.
obviously
Yeah.
probably our favorite. But Winter Spring is always awesome. I wish they would do something more like Winter Spring, which I guess they kind of did in Ashran. Uh, but
Not nearly as well.
yeah, it didn't feel that great.
I felt like it was a good carryover because Burning Crusade did a good job, and they kind of started it in Silithus in vanilla, but having the entire region be a kind of PvP competition, where you're taking the different towers in Hellfire Citadel or what have you.
Hmm.
And it doesn't really matter that much if Horde holds all three towers in Hellfire Citadel, but we hold it because that's
Yeah,
just what we do.
yeah.
I feel like it was a big improvement of using that kind of large scale open world PvP that's
Hmm.
slightly directed and making it a little bit more focused.
Yeah, it
Um,
encourages it because I know I'm not a big PvP person, but oh yeah, going through Hellfire or whatever, I would get into tons of fights because I'm like, oh, I'm right next to these towers, I might as well grab one. Oh,
yeah,
there's an alliance or a horde at the time there. Oh, I guess we're gonna fight, and like it definitely gives you a reason to be introduced into PvP, and I think Winter Spring did that a lot. Like you don't have to play your class optimally. You can just jump in a vehicle and kind of do it that way. And I thought that was awesome. Um,
yeah.
One thing that was super weird
We're,
to me, uh, do you know what the last raid in Wrath of the Lich King was?
the last raid, I would assume ICC. I would assume.
No, it was the Ruby Sanctum.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
That's
which
kind of peculiar.
which I mean it begins to make a little bit more sense when you find out that Cataclysm is the expansion after.
Sure. Yeah.
An expansion that's kind of totally focused on dragons. Um, but yeah, again, just kind of weird. We've actually probably said more negative things about this expansion than I thought we were going to, but
Yeah.
I will
Uh,
say this is one of my favorite expansions, and
yeah.
but
even though I didn't play it all that much, I would say it's probably one of my favorites. Just going back through, I thought
Yeah.
even places like the boring tundra, that was it was still fun. Like I
Yeah.
still had a great time. I now knowing better, I'd definitely go up the Howling Fjord, Grizzly Hills route, but it
Yeah.
was still very cool. Dragonblight was a really sick region to play where you're just running around and you just anytime you can look up, there's a perpetual dragon war going on.
Yeah.
Definitely felt cool. I like the reintroduction of the Scarlet Crusade
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
because you hadn't seen them since I don't even remember what Scarlet Monastery level was. It's like 30,
Like
maybe 20
30,
something.
40 something. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was cool to see them back.
Hmm.
And then obviously Dalaran's back.
Yeah.
And Dalaran is essentially Batman's cave of every player for the rest of the game.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're right. I mean, Dalaran is probably one of the player's favorite um, capital cities of an expansion because
Yeah.
it's super simple, but it still feels like a magical city that's floating above a war zone. Like it's they
Yeah, and
nailed.
then you got the
Yeah.
PvP in the underway. You've got the dungeon, which I know a lot of people don't like. The Violet Hold, I thought it's pretty sick.
No, I
I
loved
really
Violet
like the
Hold.
prisons.
Hmm.
I liked Alcatraz. I liked Stock. What's the Alliance one?
The
Stockholm?
stockades.
Stockades. There we go. I like those prison ones. They kind of feel cool. I don't
Hmm.
know.
No, I agree. It's kind of a different change of pace for sure. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. I mean that's what I did for the most part in Wrath of the Lich King was run dungeons, because I was still young. I was still like freshman in high school, I think, at that point. So I would run Ulduar and Naxxramas with my guild, but I was always trying to get better gear by running heroic dungeons and getting those tokens to buy the like either set pieces or trinkets or stuff like that to get stronger. Um, which is a system I guess that doesn't need to exist anymore because we have mythic dungeons. So you don't necessarily
Sure.
need tokens, but I felt like a lot of people hate RNG nowadays in World of Warcraft. It's kind of a bad word, but
Hmm.
I felt like that really alleviated it. Like, okay, I didn't get a drop from this dungeon, but I'm getting these tokens, and if I run it enough times, I'll be able to get the piece of gear that I want. It won't matter if it just
Yeah.
never drops.
I don't understand the hate on tokens. I think they're great. Like
Hmm.
it's a catch up for if you just are like unlucky,
Yeah.
because I've definitely run some dungeons where it's like, all right, I did this entire week's dungeons and I got nothing but like little stones that give me minor power ups, which I already have potions for,
Hmm.
or like a little bit of gold. And it's like, okay, getting the tokens are nice. Like,
Yeah.
I enjoy the tokens.
It
I
makes you
don't
feel like
understand that for
makes you
them.
feel like you're progressing even if you're not getting drops. Like you're
Yeah.
still making progress. Um, yeah. Well, we better pick it up a little bit.
All right. I
I
think
think
these
we'll
next few might be a little bit easier.
yeah, for sure. Cataclysm. I'll start off with this one. One of my least favorite. Um,
I think most people's probably.
yeah, this is when I switched to Horde, which kind of actually
Yeah.
makes Cataclysm a little bit fresher for me because I had to relearn pretty much all of Kalimdor and all of Eastern Kingdoms and kind of refigure out where my cities were versus where the Alliance's cities were. It introduced the
Yeah, I remember that
Worgen.
was your biggest thing is like Ogremar sucks. Like
I
who
still
designed this city?
I still will say that I think Ironforge is a way better
Oh,
capital
yeah.
than Orgrimmar.
Stormwind too. Yeah.
Stormwind too, but I was always in I was always in Night Elf Underground and Ironforge. But
Yeah. For lower reasons, sure.
of course. Um, but
Couldn't be in Darnassus.
that's my least favorite capital.
Thank
Thank
God we
God it's
burned it.
gone. Yeah. um, but yeah, so I mean, Cataclysm it introduced Worgen and goblins. The
Which
Worgen
again, eh?
Yeah, the Worgen starting zone was really cool. Obviously, Gen Greymane and what's his name, Gallywix have become really important lore characters for their respective factions. But just you know, I still don't have a max level or even a semi-leveled goblin. I've just never really been interested in it.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and I will say, for all of Cataclysm's flaws, which we haven't really gone into that much, it was a super ambitious expansion because
Without a
max
doubt.
level we only had what 5 zones, but they had to make enough content to remake the world.
Hmm.
And some of those zones that they remade the world into, like
Those are significant changes.
yeah, like Silver Pine Forest with Sylvanas, incredible. One of the best zones in the game.
Yeah,
Um,
I would say probably my favorite leveling zone.
yeah. What was it? The shoot, Stone Talon Peaks. Literally the most
Oh yeah.
boring zone in the world in vanilla. Suddenly you have a subplot where or I guess a main plot where you're working for this general, and Garrosh has a moment of like really awesome being the war chief, because this is the expansion where Thrall ditched us all to go be Green Jesus. Um, Garrosh throws a general off of a cliff for blowing up a tree. Like it really made you feel like Garrosh, I'm proud to be a member of the Horde under you.
And it was a return to the traditional horde of not really just Thrall being peaceful. It was like, all right, blood and honor. You're either honor or it's all blood.
Yeah, well that's it. It's blood and honor. And
Hmm.
Garrosh walked that line really well initially in
Hmm.
Cataclysm. Um, and also, they did completely underwater zone in Vashir, which
Very ambitious.
I liked thematically.
Yes.
It,
Playing it sucked, but it
yeah,
was very sick once you kind of actually got the feel of things could attack you from under you and on top of you.
yeah. It kind of sucked. It wasn't the most enjoyable place while you're there, but looking back, you're like, wow, that they did that really well, and I
Hmm.
had a lot of fun there. Um, just to me, just the story never bought me. I never bought into the story. Like I see Deathwing shows up, he cracks the world. It's the great cataclysm, and now we got to go kill him. But then the first raid is, or it might not be the first raid. One of the first raids, Bastion of Twilight, really cool. You're taking on the capital of the Twilight Hammer, and you kill Cho'Gall. And then the rest of the expansion, you're still fighting the Twilight Hammer.
Yeah, and
And
that's one criticism I will take against Cataclysm is the enemies were not that diverse.
mm-hmm,
Both Burning Crusade and Wrath really had some diverse people where you go in expecting something, you get a whole lot of something else.
mm-hmm,
You went in expecting Twilight's Hammer and dragons, and that's essentially all you got. I mean, you had Ragnaros and some fire druids, but
mm-hmm,
really, like, fire and shadow were the two entire elements of the opposing factions, and it was a little bit redundant, and you get tired of looking at the weird rock formations and the shitty tents of the Twilight Hammer after a while. Like the designs were not that cool to begin with, and they
mm-hmm.
just are all over the place.
Yeah, and I mean, most of the zones are really cool, but a lot of them are super lore important. So you have Hyjal.
Hmm.
They can't really be that creative with Hyjal.
Yeah,
Um,
painted themselves into a corner with a lot of the zones.
yeah, they could have been pretty creative with Vashir, which I think they were for the most part, with Deepholm and with Uldum. And I think Uldum is probably my favorite zone from Cataclysm, but even that, you're just fighting Nazi goblins as a treasure hunter, and it kind of gets a little repetitive.
Yeah,
And then Deepholm is just like it doesn't feel like anything's
Very
there.
repetitive.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
where Wrath of the Lich King, like you said, and Burning Crusade, they really flexed their creative muscles. I feel like for some reason Cataclysm they they didn't do that, and it could be
I
just
think it was just
because
too ambitious.
yeah, that could be it. And, they had to remake the entire old world
And
while
I think
making
that
all of these zones.
a lot of people criticize some of the remakes, but I think they were all. It's really easy to romanticize the past and be like,
Hmm.
oh, you shouldn't have changed the blasted lands or whatever argument, Silver Pine Forest, whatever arguments might have been. Those regions really needed a redo. Like
Hmm.
they were horrible. I
Yeah,
mean, even now, blasted lands is not. Or no, it would. What am I thinking about? Blasted lands or
Barons.
who knows?
Are you thinking of?
Not even the Barons. No, I'm thinking about the one where in the remake, there's basically you go in and there's a giant skid mark essentially of Deathwing crashing through,
Oh,
and
the
there's three guys.
Badlands.
Badlands. There we go. Badlands was horrible,
Yeah.
horrible before, and now it's like the quests aren't necessarily that crazy lore wise, but it's just fun.
Well,
Like
actually, I think it's the Blasted Lands. They introduce Rathian for the first time, which
for the Blasted Lands or
the Badlands,
Badland.
the Badlands,
Okay.
because in the Badlands there's a quest line where you're trying to basically save this preserved egg of the like they you basically find this Titan technology to purge all the corruption from one egg, and that egg hatches, and it's Rathian. And then later on in the expansion, when you're max level and you're taking on Deathwing and everything, Rathian pops back up again if you're a rogue to give you the legendary quest line for Fangs of the Father.
Hmm.
Um, so that was super creative to kind of, in my opinion, and I always love it when World of Warcraft creates a really, really interesting character that isn't derived from one of their prior games.
Yeah.
Because it's hard for them to do. But Rathian is one that they did, and you didn't even realize how important he would be in the world during that time. You just think, oh, he's hunting down the black dragons. That's cool.
Hmm.
Um, but I mean, Dragon Soul as a raid, I thought was
Well, before
very
we get too far
imaginative.
off, the zones. Going back
Oh
to that,
yeah, okay.
uh, I might have misspoke. I'm not 100% for uh, all their redos. I think the zones are more fun now, but I also think it kind of complicates things leveling up from level one because
Hmm.
you're going into it and it's all vanilla, and then all of a sudden you're in Cataclysm out of nowhere. I feel like even to this day it feels a little bit whiplashed, where it's like you
Like
don't.
you go into a cataclysm world, but then have to go to or had to go to Burning Crusade first.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't mind some intermixing, but it just feels weird where aspects of Wrath of the Lich King kind of go into and Burning Crusade as well, who Garrosh is.
Hmm.
You don't start the game really knowing who Garrosh is. I think most people would probably know who Thrall is as leader of the Horde. But Garrosh, you kind of need to learn who he is,
Hmm.
and you're not really given that opportunity. It's just kind of like, oh, okay, this guy's the war chief, and he's really badass. But you'll get to his story later on where it just feels disjointed.
Yeah. What I think that's probably why they're implementing the new leveling system with just like you get to go through and
Sure.
experience an entire world story because yeah, you're right. It's weird that you go to you're like leveling as with Garrosh as your war chief. Then you go to Outland and I don't know if you meet him, but like you basically meet his family
Yeah,
in
you meet him, I
Nagrand.
believe, in Nagrand.
And it's like, all right, that's kind of weird. Like it you're right. It doesn't feel right. I think I think they were just trying to keep the game fresh. I kind of consider Cataclysm the end of the old World of Warcraft. Um,
What do you mean by that?
So there is a fundamental shift in, it seems, the way the developers go about making the game from vanilla Burning Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King, and Cataclysm to
Hmm.
Mists of Pandaria, Warlords of Draenor, Legion, BFA. Like there
Yeah, there's a big change.
there's a seismic shift in how they go about making the expansions. Like, for example, after Burning Crusade, it there's nothing that suggests we're gonna go attack the Lich King. After the Lich King, besides the Ruby Sanctum talking about dragons, there's no reason we expect Deathwing to show up. After Cataclysm, there's no reason we have to expect to go to Pandaria.
Yeah,
However,
very
with
disconnected.
Pandaria, we know we defeat Garrosh, and then Garrosh goes back in time to Warlords of Draenor. So we know why we go to Draenor. In Draenor, Gul'dan gets sent back to our reality at the end of that. So now we know why we're coming back to chase Gul'dan and why the Legion's there. After the Legion,
Yeah,
you know,
far more fluid,
yeah,
without a doubt.
there is more of a linear story of World of Warcraft that they really push. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, so yeah, my main complaint with Cataclysm is it just feels disjointed, um, and then a lot of people take ire with the whole Thrall is Green Jesus, Thrall saves the world. I'm not that upset about it. I'm okay if someone else is the hero. It just seemed really strange that we went to Thrall's wedding during that expansion. Like, okay, that's weird. Um, and then,
It's because he's raising Garrosh Part 2.
yeah, maybe. But, and then at the end, the final, after we defeat Deathwing, all the dragon aspects are like, well, we've used all our power. We're no longer aspects. Oh, but don't worry, Thrall has a child, and everybody cheers. And it's like, what? Like, it's just, I, I don't know. It seemed super disjointed, and I'm not story wise. I think it's the least important expansion, and
Yeah,
they
without a doubt.
somehow made me sick of dragons, which is hard to do in a fantasy
That
world.
yeah, that's a difficult
Um,
thing for sure.
yeah, but okay. On to one of what I think is the most underrated expansions, Mists of Pandaria. Um,
And probably the best soundtrack. Just saying, Miss Pandaria soundtrack is amazing.
yeah, it's good, and this expansion exemplifies what I was saying. Of the developers always kill it when they have a ton of freedom. All they had
Yeah,
to go off of
yes.
with Pandaria is the Pandaren Brewmaster from Warcraft 3. And they created
Which
Pandaria. They created the Mogu, the Mantid, the Shah, everything, and all they had to go off of was the Brewmaster. Like, right there, that's awesome. I know a lot of people, when it came out, were kind of pissed off that it was, everybody thought it was pandering to the Chinese market, and Kung Fu Panda had just come out, which really sucks for World of Warcraft. But
yeah,
um,
they were a part of the lore. I
yeah,
mean,
no, yeah, they had been around for a while. But they just that freedom created, like you said, probably the best soundtrack, and probably one of the most lore important um, expansions we've ever had that introduced just so much new lore to the world.
and lore that's been used since.
Yeah,
It's not just arbitrary new stuff. Like it's the Mogu have as recent as this BFA
yeah.
have played a key role in being a significant race that does things in the world still.
Which it should be. I mean, they're they should be akin to the Vrykul, in a lot of respects. Like, they should be an important group within the World of Warcraft, within Azeroth's political system. Um, And this is where another reason why I say this is the start of modern WoW is you really get a lot of subplots. So like
Hmm.
in this expansion, you have the whole Anduin developing into his own person subplot. Like this is the
And essentially
expansion.
being presented as the chosen one.
Yeah, yeah, I'd say I
Right?
suppose
There's that
so.
mural essentially.
Pardon?
As I remember, there's a mural of the lore master Cho or something going around being like, "Oh, and we have this thing of this guy's going to protect us against the darkness," and it's literally a mock-up of Anduin on the wall.
Oh, I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, I don't remember what region it was.
Hmm. But yeah, I mean, you know, he crash lands, he's captured by the horde, and then you have the whole quest line where Varian saves him, and you know, it really starts to show Garrosh as kind of wow, he's willing to use a child to accomplish his goals and all that. And then you have Anduin and Rathian kind of hanging out, and it's just it's really cool that as a character we get to grow up with Anakin as the world evolves around us. And
Mhm.
Anduin, this is the start of that. This is when they really introduce him as a character. Um, yeah, I mean,
I will say one criticism I have of Miss is I did not like the capital city system, where it was essentially just an inn
mhm.
and it was separate. Whereas I feel like it's very valuable to have the Shatrafts, the Dollarons, the things that bring all levels together.
Like
It felt
the
like,
neutral.
yeah, it felt like the Horde and the Alliance were very separate in
Mhm.
this expansion, and not very often do you have any kind of crossover between them.
Well, I mean, to be fair, the expansion started off. I mean, the whole point we're on Pandaria is to claim its resources to fight against the other side.
Sure,
And it's
sure.
that fight that awakens the Shah, and then we get embroiled in their own politics. Um,
Hmm.
but uh, yeah, I mean, just going down through Mists of Pandaria, it was kind of fun throughout, and every zone had its own kind of unique feel. Um,
Yeah.
and even like Krasserang Wilds, which I never leveled through, but I did go back to do the I forget the name of the quest line, but it's basically the one where the divine bell or whatever, the one where you are
It's a
actually
build up to Vol'jin's rebellion, essentially.
yeah, exactly. Like um that's still an awesome place to level through. Like every place was really cool. The Dread Wastes, like there's like almost nowhere for you to hang out. Like there's nowhere for you to make it as a flight path. For nowhere you're safe because there's a mantid swarm. Kind of like Ice Crown, you're not supposed to be safe there. And I think that's really cool. And one of the things I'm excited about for the Maw in Shadowlands is I'm okay with having a zone where I'm not supposed to be. I'm okay being the foreigner that's trying to be expelled. I think that's really cool. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Another comment I would have on it is first Ukum and the Duker, perhaps the best line ever used in World of Warcraft.
Absolutely.
Uh, but more than that, that whole Hosen and the fish people, whatever they're called,
Jinyu or
the
whatever, yeah.
Jinyu, that's right. It felt kind of weird where Jade Forest, it essentially felt like you're building alliances, you're forming power bases, but then that doesn't really ever continue
Yeah.
on past Jade Forest, where I would have liked to see some aspects of, oh, you're in, the Valley of the Four Winds. There's a
Yeah.
Hosengard or two or something, where it seems like there were you got a huge army of people, and I get probably most of them lore wise died against fighting that first Shaw, but
Hmm.
it was just I would have liked to see them take that further.
Yeah, I agree. And I will say in uh, Taolong Steps, I believe there's portions where as a Horde member, Nazgrim rolls up because he's kind of the one leading the whole Horde war effort in Pandaria. Nazgrim
Yeah.
rolls up to a village and says, "Okay, this is now a Horde village. You're all going to be Horde soldiers." And then he starts basically training the Pandaren to be soldiers for the Horde. So I mean, but yeah, I agree with you. Besides that, you really don't have much of that faction trying to build up, or the Hosen aren't really involved or anything like that. It does feel kind of strange. Um,
And Siege of Orgrimmar, that's just probably, in my opinion, my favorite raid.
yeah, Siege of Orgrimmar was great. A historically long patch. I think that patch was over a year on its own. Um, but looking back on it, I'll say it doesn't feel that long because I feel like there was always something to do.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, especially that was the beginning of the farms, which
yeah,
ended up being a prelude to garrisons.
yeah. No, that's true. That's true. They were kind of building on that system. Um,
Hmm.
I will say though, a lot of people don't like parts of this expansion because they feel that Garrosh just went evil out of nowhere. Um,
Yeah, I mean that's a fair criticism
well,
where a lot
yeah.
of Cataclysm was building him up as being this cool guy, and then all of a sudden he went from being cool to being bad extremely quickly.
Well, I will say this. I buy into it a little bit more. Um, because I try to look at Garrosh as a whole picture. In Outland, he thought that his father was the one that doomed their race, and that they went off to another planet and probably all died, and then their planet exploded, and all of that stemmed from Grom's drinking the blood of Manaroth and cursing the orc race. He shows up. Thrall says, "Oh my gosh, your father was my one of my closest friends and teachers. He saved the Orcish race by killing Manaroth." So now Garrosh is like, "Oh my gosh, I can be proud of myself, my family, and my father. Like it's okay to be proud." And then in Cataclysm or in Northrend, he kind of tries to prove himself to Thrall and to the Horde that he can be who his father was, the great warrior, by taking on the Lich King, fighting the Alliance, all that stuff. Fast forward to Cataclysm, now he's War Chief, and he's still trying to prove himself by trying to win this war against the Alliance. Now he goes to Pandaria and he finds all of these weapons that he can use to beat the Alliance and win. And at the very end, the Shah that kind of we have to fight. I think it's the Shah that we fight when that Mogu purges us, right before we kind of move into Siege of Orgrimmar proper. He summons the pride from us so that we can kill our pride before we go take on Garrosh in Siege of Orgrimmar. And it's that pride that allowed the Shah to take hold of Garrosh's heart. And that's why when we beat Garrosh in Siege of Orgrimmar, yeah, we beat Garrosh, but we really beat this Shah monstrosity Garrosh that's consumed with the pride that he would have if he destroys the Alliance. So
Hmm.
I see it as, I mean, it
That's a
definitely,
very good way to look at it. I've never really looked at it that
yeah,
way, but
it,
you
it,
on something.
it does seem like he turned really quick from Cataclysm and kind of being a good guy to suddenly destroying all of Theramore and attacking Pandaria. Like, yeah, I get it. That's quite a stretch, but I see it as he was corrupted and not and corrupted in a way I think I like better than just the typical, oh, the old gods got him, now he's evil. It was more of a, like, you could see why
There's a
his
character flaw.
yeah, his thought process continued to shift, and the old gods took that in another direction. Um, so I get it. And then when he's kind of free of the corruption and then he starts the next expansion, um, I feel like he's more at peace with himself. And we see that a little bit more.
Hmm.
Um, but but yeah. So, is there anything else you want to say about Mists of Pandaria?
No, I think that about wraps it up for me.
Okay, yeah, great expansion, love it. Now to one that people don't like as much. You could start off this one.
Draenor, well, starters, I thought it was really fun going back and kind of reliving some of this stuff instead of always pushing the story forward. It was interesting to go back and see these heroic people that you always hear about in, obviously it was mostly Horde lore,
Mm-hmm.
but also a little bit of the Alliance lore too, and seeing how they actually were as people. Um, Again, it definitely built off a lot of the thematic elements. It definitely borrowed some of the things in terms of Burning Crusade, of first going through the portal and seeing this huge battle going on.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I also really liked that beginning part where to save your planet, you had to release Gul'dan, which you just you knew that was going to blow up in your face
Yeah.
somehow, but you just didn't really have a choice. That was, you kind of just had to do that.
Yeah, I think he
Um,
even says during when you release him, you'll live to regret this later, or something like this. That, yeah.
yeah. So it was some cool ideas. Um, Definitely, it felt like they went halfway. Like they had some really cool ideas, but they kind of didn't execute all of them
Mm-hmm.
how I would have wanted to. Shatrath was very lackluster.
Mm-hmm.
I thought for sure old Shatrath was going to be the big neutral city,
Mm-hmm.
and instead you had War Spear for the Horde, which
Yeah.
was I don't think I ever was there for more than 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Obviously, the garrison was made to be the new character home,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but I just felt like Shatrath was just
An opportunity missed.
lackluster. They could have, yeah. I mean, if you look at Suramar and Legion, huge cityscape, they could
Mm-hmm.
have done the same thing with uh, Shattrath. They could have been a huge, street battle between the demons and the Draenei, and maybe or the orcs invading or something, where it just huge lore city, and it just was essentially nothing.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that. I think Ashran is the worst implementation of a pseudo capital city. Um, in Warcraft, in the history of Warcraft expansions, and I get it. They tried to make it so your garrison was more of like your personal capital, um,
Hmm.
but
Which
it
is a cool
still,
idea.
yeah, I get it. It's a cool idea, and I actually I like the garrison. Um, I understand its flaws, but I like what they tried to do. And again, I will never fault them for trying something that didn't work.
Yeah,
Like in Mists of Pandaria, they have scenarios. A lot of people didn't like scenarios. I liked scenarios actually, but
yeah, I thought they were cool.
they didn't. They managed to repurpose that kind of that technology that they had made for that for things like legion invasions, different like they've managed to use those tools in the future in a way that did work better. um,
Yeah,
and so I don't know if they'll ever find anything that makes the garrison system work better. um, but I
but at
liked
least they
it.
tried.
Huh.
At least they tried.
Yeah, exactly, at least they tried. We talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but the aesthetic of like a savage world that's still untamed, really cool. But
Yeah,
once you got into it and you kind of had seen every zone for a little bit, you were really just dealing with orcs, muscle bound
yeah,
orcs, all the time.
constantly.
Unless you
And I
went to
felt really
Spires of
bad for
Iraq.
Alliance players. Inspires of Iraq was probably my favorite
Yeah,
location, simply because it was just such a break from slashing through orcs all day.
yeah. Um, oh, why do you feel bad for Alliance players?
Well, because I mean, it just seemed like it was largely built for a horde. I mean, it was. I
Yeah.
get the Draenei live there too, but the Draenei are such a more minor aspect. At least at that point in the game, I think since Legion Draenei have kind of taken a more dominant role in the Alliance. But I feel
Hmm.
like orcs are the horde essentially.
Yeah.
So it was you're way more going to the history of the orcs and the horde than you are to the history of the Draenei.
Yeah. No, I think I think World of Warcraft probably throughout its history, every expansion has been really fun to level through. I think the
Mm-hmm.
least fun was probably Cataclysm, but I think Warlords of Draenor is one of the most fun uh, expansions to level through. Like
Oh yeah,
it feels good to level through. Um, it's kind of unfortunate that once after you're done leveling, that's where you kind of run into problems. So, you remember when I read off the raids for Burning Crusade and how we were surprised how many there were?
sure.
These are all the raids for Warlords of Draenor: High Mall, Blackrock Foundry, Hellfire Citadel.
Yeah.
That's it. That right there, that's gonna be hard to keep someone's attention.
And that definitely starts a trend where they're I feel like after that they're way more measured in how many raids they release uh per
Yeah,
expansion.
yeah, and but that three is just way too few.
Oh yeah,
But
that's
I,
ridiculous.
I I do cut them a little bit of slack with Warlords of Draenor, um, because I know that they kind of understood from the get go, pretty much a few months after launch, that people weren't digging the expansion, um, and so they kind of started putting resources to Legion to make sure Legion could come quicker. And what that resulted in is only three dungeons: High Mall, Blackrock Foundry, and Hellfire
And
Citadel.
good, three good dungeons, I will say. Like
Uh,
I
yeah,
honestly really liked High Mall,
yeah, High
and
Mall.
I liked all of them a lot. But the High Mall is actually one I ran quite a bit during that expansion.
Yeah, High Mall was fun. I probably ran the most Blackrock Foundry in that expansion, which I
Hmm.
think Blackrock Foundry is an incredible raid.
Oh,
Um,
without a doubt.
like I will say, every raid here is probably a top 20 raid in World of Warcraft. Like,
Yeah.
they're all incredible raids. Um, the other big issue, or two big issues I have with Warlords of Draenor, is the fact that it's an alternate universe
Yeah.
makes deaths less meaningful. So, you know, Velen dies in, I think, the starting zone for Alliance characters. He like allows himself to die so he can purify the Dark Star and make it into a Naru. I don't care because it's not our Velen. Um,
Yeah.
Murad dies, that was our Murad, but just in the scope of the rest of the expansion, I didn't really care. Um, the biggest thing, the biggest death that hit me was Orgrim Doomhammer getting killed.
Yeah, that sucked.
And the only reason I cared about that is I'm like, oh, he was one of the few people I was interested in learning about. Like, how was he pre War Chief? And he dies, and so that kind of sucked. It caused me to lose interest in what was actually going on because I didn't really care. This was just like a playground almost.
Hmm.
Nothing had serious lore implications. And then there was a definite shift in focus from Blackrock Foundry to Hellfire Citadel, where, you know, we were angry that the Iron Horde was trying to kill all the Draenei, come to our planet, kill all of us. And then suddenly the Legion comes, and we fight and free Grom, Hellscream, who's literally been trying to kill all of us from the start of the
Yeah,
expansion.
genocidal maniac.
And we're like, okay, cool, now you can fight the Legion with us. And then we end, when we kill Archimond, he yells freedom. and gets everybody to cheer with him. All the Draenei that he just tried to kill are
Like
cheering.
genocidal level.
Yeah, they're cheering for. And it's just like, really, like I don't know about that. Um,
Yeah.
there are rumors that they were going to have Shatrath as the raid after um, um, Blackrock Foundry, and that would have been the demon raid because the demons would have conquered, and then Hellfire Citadel was basically us going to attack Gromash and defeat him before he enters our world, and then he was going to drop the legendary Gorehowl and stuff like that. That's the rumor of what the expansion was supposed to be structured around, but regardless, it just kind of fell flat. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I feel like aspects of the expansion were a little bit just short-sighted.
yeah,
Uh, Namely, not expecting to add flying in the game and
yeah,
not like building the game accordingly. Like I get like, obviously not expecting to have flying for the first large portion of the game,
hmm
but to have built the region specifically anticipating there to be no flying, like it's something you've had in every other expansion. How could you expect that people wouldn't demand that?
Well, I think they were just trying to basically say, trying to get away from it because apparently a lot of developers feel that adding flying in the first place was one of the biggest mistakes WoW has ever made. Which regardless of if that's how you feel or not, it's part of the game now, and you
Yeah,
can't kind of decide that it's not. It'd be like saying, I don't know, swimming isn't part of the game because we don't want to design underwater areas. Like, sure, it's not as meaningful as flying, but if I want to swim, I don't see why that's an issue to try to swim.
yeah. And
Um,
that's why I'm saying it seems short-sighted, where
yeah.
it's something you should expect. It's
hmm
something you've done every DLC. It's not, they shouldn't have thought that they could get away with not getting that and not have a bunch of people, obviously demanding it.
Yeah, and I'm. It was cool to go back in time and like see, like you said, see kind of orcish history. But to me, I don't necessarily think an MMO like World of Warcraft should try to grapple with the issues posed by alternate universes. Um,
Yeah,
I don't necessarily feel
it's a lot
like
to take on.
you needed Gul'dan to be the catalyst for Legion. You could have used somebody else. You could have used a resurrected Gul'dan or something. But now suddenly we're in a Shadowlands world where, well, Garrosh. If Garrosh is dead, does Garrosh go to our Shadowlands? Is our Shadowlands the same as the alternate universe's
Yeah,
Shadowlands?
they're theoretically going to be the ghosts of seven different Garroshes.
Yeah. Or is there and realistically, even if there is, if it's tied solely to our planet or our universe, are there going to be two Guldans? Because there have been two Guldans that died on Azeroth. Like,
Hmm.
it just starts posing a lot of problems that I think you don't want to deal with. And going back in with the Maghar orcs a little bit later, and seeing how Draenor has devolved into like this light waging war on the Draenei or on the orcs. Like, okay, I see that you're kind of setting up for a light based expansion, or maybe light versus void expansion, and you didn't want to make it that obvious in our world. But now there's suddenly this militant Yrel that's fighting for the light, and we keep jumping back and forth between the alternate Draenor. Like, I don't know, you're just creating internal problems that I don't think you want to deal with.
Yeah,
Um, but I think we've kind of done Warlords of Draenor to death.
yeah, definitely.
Um, now to the second coming of World of Warcraft, Legion. which they introduced a ton of radical changes to the world. Uh, First of all, we got demon hunters, the second hero class,
Yeah.
which
Hmm.
I think are also one of the most popular classes in the game now.
Without a
Um,
doubt.
they're one of the they're a class that feels like it was built by a modern gamer. Like a lot of other classes are very okay. You like hunter, you run up, you stand still, and you shoot somebody while you're pressing buttons to do different shots or have your beast attack. Demon hunter, you're jumping around, you're like dashing, you're like a lot of it is area effect abilities that you get to aim. And so it's a lot more active of a play style. Um, so yeah, I think Demon Hunters are pretty popular, pretty successful additions.
Yeah,
And
without a doubt.
we also had World Quests, which while people seem to be getting a little tired of them in BFA, way better than the old uh, system of going to a daily quest hub and just sitting there getting all the quests and then you go out and do your missions. Like World
And you
Quest,
kind of have to expect world quests like dailies to get boring eventually. Like
yeah.
it's not going to be endless content, but it's definitely far better filler content and catch up mechanic than dailies could ever be.
Hmm. And then we have the two biggest successes, I think, from Legion, two of the biggest successes, order halls and artifact weapons.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I mean, first of all, throwing in order halls while you're going through some incredible zones was just a really cool way to reconnect with your class and feel
And
unique in the world.
they did it smoothly too,
Hmm.
where I felt like it wasn't forced on you. It's not something you had to go to right in that moment. I mean, in a lot of situations, you kind of just, I mean, obviously you took a flight path to it eventually, but they were part of the map in a lot of the cases. At least, the hunter's hunting lodge. Like
Yeah.
it was literally just an area within High Mountain.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
mean, so you had super varied ones. So you had the hunter one that was just in high mountain. Then you had the shaman one that was literally at the maelstrom, which yeah, that makes sense. And then
yeah.
you have the death knights that literally moved their necropolis next to Dalaran, and it's shrouded in clouds, so no one can see it really unless you're a death knight. Like it, they did a lot to push the class fantasy, which I think World of
And again, it's
Warcraft.
just like Scryer and Aldor.
Yeah,
It
that's
was
true.
another way to really differentiate yourself and develop yourself as a character
Hmm.
beyond just Horde Alliance.
Yeah, yeah, and then on top of that, the artifact quest lines, while some of them repeated, a lot of them were pretty unique and actually felt important in the world. Like,
And it was a good push too to become, sorry to cut you off, but it
no,
was a good push to like look at other specs.
yeah,
Like,
that's
at
true.
least for me, I never ever switch specs. Very rare, maybe if I was a hunter and I was trying to pick up a certain animal, I would switch to beast mastery or something like that. But
Hmm.
it's very rarely did I ever switch specs, and it really encouraged you to explore not just your spec and but like your entire class,
Yeah,
and kind of bring another level of mastery to your class that I think a lot of kind of everyday players didn't necessarily have or tried to explore.
yeah, and the artifacts also kind of gave you an opportunity to create a new end game system. And people are kind of sick of systems right now with the end of BFA, but artifacts really allowed you to feel like you were always progressing, even though
Yeah.
you were already max level and you may not have gotten a piece of gear. Like you were always improving. Um, yeah, I think the the quests, like the leveling again through Legion, incredible. Order halls, incredible. The only issue with the order hall is some of them were way better than others, and you
Yeah,
know that's okay
Hunter
most of the
was
time,
horrible.
huh?
Hunter was
Oh
horrible.
yeah, I mean you're fighting some random like Felguard or something that's trying to kill mages. Like okay, whatever. Oh, Death Knight, you literally go and raise General Nazgrim, like Whitemane. You raise them all from the dead, and then you attack the Paladin Order Hall to raise Tyrion Fordring from the dead. Like, obviously, way better than probably any other
Yeah,
Order Hall. But
yeah. I
um,
don't even remember what we did as a hunter. Is like completely not memorable
it
at
was,
all.
yeah, it wasn't that great.
But I mean that's just
That's fair.
some classes are obviously going to get more attention than others, and
Yeah,
unfortunately,
I mean,
across
they did do a good job with Rogue, and Rogue usually gets kind of overlooked. Um, like, you were basically hunting spies that the Legion had dropped in, and it felt pretty good. And then Warrior too. I've never played through Warrior class hall, but chilling with Odin and Helya in them, or not Helya, but Odin, that that seemed pretty cool.
yeah,
Like
it
it
adds another layer to the actual gameplay. Like it's not just you know, added gameplay that never really comes into contact. Like if you were a warrior and you go and do the Helya, uh, was it a raid? I think Helya had a
yeah, the
raid.
Helya raid, yeah.
Suddenly that has a lot, or even going and fighting Odin, uh, that has a lot more meaning to you as a warrior
Yeah.
than it does at other classes. And again, it adds kind of the uniqueness of your class.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, like having a druid that was max level and going through Emerald Nightmare, it's like, oh wow, like I was here. Like this is where my little ability takes me, and it's become this evil. Uh, yeah, they did an excellent job making you feel like you had a unique take on the world. Um, they also created. This is another instance where they were so creative. Um, you know, with Odin and Helya, and I know the names are very Norse gaudy, but all the lore they created for Odin and Helya and the High Mountain Tauren um, and Suramar and the Nightborn, like they all they had to go off of was that the Broken Shores included an island that Sargeras's avatar was buried on. And from that, they birthed all of this extra stuff. Um, and
And it's stuff that's carried on. Like it's
yeah, it's had a profound impact on the lore of the world permanently.
yeah,
Um,
without a doubt.
and I mean, personally, Suramar, like I was skeptical of it being like, oh, you can only get here when you're max level. Why would I go level through a zone or quest through a zone when I'm already max level? But Suramar is probably my favorite zone they've ever had in the game.
Yeah, and it just introduces a cool new
Yeah.
type. Like, you've never before a city was never really even considered something that could be a zone in itself, and they really showed what that could look like.
Yeah, and it was a city. Like it wasn't like Orgrimmar that like okay, maybe a couple hundred people can live here. Like that that was a legit city that could hold a lot like thousand like the scale was right.
Yeah,
Um and it felt cumbersome getting through it, but it just felt right. And the build
definitely. Yeah,
up,
there's definitely some growing pains,
yeah.
but it was a good addition without a
Yeah,
doubt.
and it built up perfectly to Nighthold, which
Hmm.
is probably my favorite raid too. Um,
Wow.
it just all the bosses, yeah, they were all for the most part Nightborn, but they were all so unique. And then you had a little bit of demons spattered in there, and really to this point in Legion, the only raid before this one was Emerald Nightmare, so we didn't really have a ton of Legion bosses for raids.
Yeah.
Um, and you're fighting your way up, and there's all these different mechanics, and then there's Elisand, which such a cool mechanic that there's different orbs and stuff going around that either increase the time around you and will cause debuffs and buffs to tick off faster or slower.
Very strategic.
It was so cool. And then you fight Gul'dan, and it starts as like kind of a casting fight, and then he just starts bashing at people because he's empowered by the Fel. And then I believe, I never rated it on Mythic, but I believe in Mythic, Illidan, Sargeras does assume control of Illidan partially. And you're literally fighting Gul'dan and a Sargeras controlled Illidan on the top of Nighthold as Gul'dan's trying to open a rift to Sargeras. Like, that's just awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Nighthold. I love.
And of course, the return of Illidan in
Yeah.
itself was a huge, you know, arguably a correction from what we were discussing. So one of the bad
Yeah.
parts about the story
Mhm.
of Burning Crusade, the return of Illidan as still the anti-hero, but actually more of the hero than the anti part.
Yeah, and I think they really handled him well throughout the rest of the expansion. Like, we go to Antorus, and the Naru is trying to basically light forge him, and he destroys the Naru, and we're all kind of shocked. Like, okay, Naru are always supposed to be good guys, but I understand why Illidan did that. And it creates the question in our minds is like, are the Naru always good? Is the light always good? And we kind of get to
Yeah,
ask that question again when we meet Yrel in the future. But he poses that question really well. And then when we're
yeah,
done with Antorus, he's now the jailer of Sargeras at the throne of the Pantheon. So like they
which
managed
is
to
a badass sign off.
yeah, like they encapsulated his story and then put him on a shelf and don't need to use him for a while. And I think that was exactly the right way to handle him.
Yeah,
Um,
and for the whole light conversation, I think it adds more complexity, more enjoyment to the story where it's not just like, oh, it's light is good and dark is bad, like no shit kind of thing. Like, or it adds more gray area where
yeah.
guys can be bad and bad guys can be good.
Yeah, and like Illyria also pushes that a little bit. Um, or not a little bit, but a lot, because she's literally a void elf. But she's a good guy. And so like yeah, I was a little surprised that they didn't go more of a light versus void expansion after Legion, because I felt like they
Yeah.
were pointing so heavily towards that.
Yeah, it
Um,
definitely felt like that. And it felt like even parts of BFA, maybe after a patch they were going to introduce that, but I guess not.
yeah, well, I think that's I think they're saving that one for another emergency. but but yeah, I just loved everything that they did with Legion. Even Il'ganath, who is just a random boss in Emerald Nightmare, he just whispers stuff to you, and it was just a great addition to the feeling of the world of like, this guy is giving you all these riddles, but you don't get to see what they mean or even if they ever come true.
Yeah.
It
It,
was
it
just great.
it's an expansion that held or at least captivated my attention for a long time. Like I really until the very end of it, I did not get that bored of
Yeah.
Legion.
No, and I was again skeptical when we go to Argus for one patch.
Hmm.
But I get it, because if we couldn't be there for a whole expansion because it'd be boring. Uh, it would just all
Yeah, I
be
thought it was
green
a
fire.
nice mini campaign.
Yeah, I
It
thought it
served that
worked.
thing pretty well.
Yeah, I couldn't be happier with how Legion ended. Um, it was great. It was a great expansion, pretty much throughout. Um, okay, on
Return
to
of the Shared City too. Just
yeah.
as one last thing,
No,
I have to say.
yeah, they definitely took a lot of notes from Wrath of the Lich King. Uh, you know, bringing back Dalaran itself, going to an island in Azeroth that has a ton of people that we didn't know about. Um, you know, fighting, the Lich King at the end of ICC is like a huge bad guy that felt like you pretty much won World of Warcraft when you beat him.
Sure.
And this one ends with you defeating a Titan.
Yeah.
Like,
Arguably the bad guy throughout
yeah,
World of Warcraft. I mean, obviously the old gods and the Void Lords are on a thing of their own, but
yeah,
Targaryen really was the antagonist of World of Warcraft, of the Warcraft universe,
yeah, for sure.
for the most part.
And they managed to do something that I was very surprised that I bought into and I really liked. They allowed us to defeat Sargeras without ever fighting him directly.
Sure, because that would have been ridiculous.
Yeah, but it also saves him for the future in the event that they do want us to fight him. We haven't already fought him. Whereas Archimonde at the end of Warlords of Draenor, it's like, oh, the end boss of this expansion is somebody that we fought in a side raid in Burning Crusade. Like, ah.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this one, it's like they they saved Sargeras for us for the future.
Yeah,
I thought it was great.
very forward thinking throughout.
Yeah, no, and that's another part of the whole new World of Warcraft is they're always advancing plot lines
Yeah, always
constantly.
leading up to something new.
Yeah. Um, Now for our current expansion, Battle for Azeroth. Um, not
Which I
not
will just say, underrated.
yeah,
So underrated, in my opinion.
it's not well received. I think it's going to be a lot like Mists of Pandaria. I think people are didn't like it during portions of it, but when you look back on it, you're going to enjoy it. Because I will say, I think BFA has the best story of any expansion.
Yeah, at least among the best,
Yeah, I mean,
without a doubt.
you have this war between the Alliance and the Horde, and like the kind of Sylvanas versus Jaina, but also versus Varrock dynamic going on.
Yeah,
But then you also have the stories for both the Horde and Alliance on their individualized continents, which I thought was really cool.
I
Um,
thought I thought that was super effective. Where at first, when I first saw that, I thought, okay, this is going to be uh, something where Alliance and Horde are super separate, and to a degree that was true, but it felt like it was more unique
mhm.
and yeah, more individualized, I
Yeah,
think.
I will say when I see Alliance running around Zandalar, I do think I need to kill them because this is my home. They didn't
Yeah,
fight
without a doubt.
to defend this place from the blood trolls and Zool and all that. I did. They shouldn't be here.
Hmm.
They really sold that well, and they managed to continue that with Battle for Dazara Lore, which was the first raid where you actually had different raids for Horde and Alliance. And
And I hope we see more of that.
yeah, I thought Battle for Dazara Lore was a great idea. And it seems to have been executed well. A lot of people seem to like it as a raid.
It was just fun. It was entertaining fighting a giant golem made out of coins, or fighting
Yeah,
Jaina, or as Horde being an alliance player killing the king of Zandalar. Like
yeah,
very immersive.
Yeah, but like,
And I feel like it's true with. Go for it.
no, 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 go, go, go.
I was gonna say I feel like it's true with all the raids in this. Where, well, okay, maybe not all the raids. Crucible of Storm, I still have no idea where that came from, but
Oh,
it,
okay, perfect. You segued me right in there. But go ahead, you can
but
finish
I
your
was
thought.
so just the Gahoon storyline was really, it was so central to Zandalar, and I think that Nazmir. I loved the desert area, but
Vol'dun, yeah.
Nazmir Nazmir without a doubt took the cake as the best uh, zone. I mean, in the entire expansion, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. Nazmir was great. I loved what they did with Vol'dun because it
Hmm.
felt like such an empty zone, but like
Yeah,
in the right
they,
way.
they they both had their own values, but what I'm saying is Nazmir built up to the Gahoon raid,
Hmm.
where you knew who Gahoon was. Gahoon had been presented as almost, at least for me, it felt like he was going to be the bad guy of the entire expansion.
Yeah.
Uh, whereas, I guess you see that in some other expansions, but it felt very succinct. It felt very right. Uh,
It was like a
and
self-contained story that made sense.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
which I think Battle for Azeroth did that because you have the Gahoon story, and then after that you have the Naga story where we're going into Nazjatar to fight Queen Ashara, and then after that we have the full-blown Black Empire Old God story where we go into Nyalotha, and like I think they managed to weave so many stories in and out perfectly.
And they're all just related enough to each other, but all still unique enough where you don't get bored of it.
Yeah,
Like going back to that, it was Old God, but it's Old God like we've never seen it before.
yeah.
Where
Um,
Nzoth felt more traditional Old God, but Gahoon definitely felt more decay,
yeah,
more
it
just
was.
uniqueness.
Yeah, it was a new feeling, which was really cool for an old god. Um, but for Crucible of Storms, actually, that raid had a lot of important stuff going on because that raid was Inzoth testing the player character to see if we could defeat Ajara because he didn't want us to get the dagger of Zalatath, which he had, until he knew that we could defeat Ashara, because he knew that Ashara would get the dagger and try to use it to kill him as soon as she freed him. So she wouldn't free Nzoth unless she had Zalatath. And so by making sure we were strong enough to take her on before us getting the dagger, we basically go to Najatar. She gets the dagger. She thinks she's confident and can beat Nzoth. She uses us to free Nzoth, but then we beat her before she can imprison him in the dagger. Like it sets up the entire reason, really, why we're going to why we're going to fight Ashara, you know, why she's been waiting this long to free him.
Hmm.
So I agree. It was definitely a mini raid, but I think
I think, and I
it
think the build up to it was nuanced,
yeah,
it's good in some aspects, but for people like myself who are not necessarily paying as much attention to it,
yeah.
it was a little bit confusing, a little
Hmm.
bit of like kind of a learning curve, I guess you could say, just figuring out why you're there.
Yeah, I will say in Battle for Azeroth as a whole, you kind of had to keep up with what was going on
Sure.
pretty quickly, or it doesn't make sense. Like, wait, Varrock went to fight Anduin at the Battle of Lordaeron. Why is he now raising a rebellion against Sylvanas? Like, it,
Yeah.
it, it. They have a lot of progression in the middle that if you're not watching, and like if you miss one quest line, it doesn't make any sense.
I
Um,
think that is another interesting thing of how separate the Horde and Alliance were, where, theoretically speaking, if you're in a world where if you're Horde, you can't look up on YouTube and see what happened on the Alliance zone.
Hmm.
You might not actually know. Like it's there's kind of a bit of an information gap,
Yeah.
which is you know detrimental in some aspects, but actually is kind of cool. Where in actual fog of war situation, you don't know exactly what happened, and you kind of just have to take Sylvanas' word for it, or
Yeah, that's true.
kind of make up your own opinion.
Yeah, she can control you a little bit more because there is a lack of information. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm
And
gonna
we just
go.
have to
Go ahead.
go. I was just gonna say, and you kind of have to also the epicness of losing two faction capitals. Like Darnassus is no big deal,
Hmm.
but like the loss of Undercity,
That's
aside from
huge.
Orgrimmar, that's really the only other usable horde capital. Like Thunderbluff is all right, but it's a bit messy.
Yeah,
Silvermoon City is unappro.
pointless.
Yeah, I mean it's the loss of those cities were huge.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah, stepping away from story a little bit and more into just
Hmm.
like the gameplay itself.
Sure.
A lot of people haven't liked Island Expeditions or
Ugh,
Warfronts.
I
Um,
love them.
I really like them. Warfronts, I do see the issue of like they kind of get old pretty quick.
Sure.
But again,
Well,
I see them kind of as a system like scenarios where I cannot wait to see what they can do with the Warfront system in the future. Like it seems like something that they can use. Like, could you imagine the battle for Undercity as if you're playing as the Alliance and you do a Warfront to take Undercity? Like, I don't know. It seems like something you could do to make set piece battles in WoW epic and involve the player without just having a cinematic.
there's a lot of potential there, and as I said earlier, all content's going to get old eventually.
Yeah.
It's just kind of the nature. You can't expect it to be endlessly entertaining.
Hmm.
But I think it does a good job of staying interesting. Um, it's cool. It adds a kind of PVE PvP combination.
Yeah.
I think if they were able to make it a little bit more like, because I feel like you could essentially just sit there and as long as like half your teams pay attention, you can kind of get through it without really worrying
Yeah.
that you're not going to make it.
Hmm.
I think it would be cool if there were more PvP aspects to it, or there were more difficulty. It was more difficult
Yeah.
where you actually had to really repulse different enemy waves.
Hmm.
But I understand you can't make it too difficult to the point where people lose interest because the rewards aren't good enough, or whatever the
Yeah.
criticism may be.
Yeah, I could definitely see them adding. I agree with you. I wish they had some PvP aspect to it. I
Hmm.
get it because one side is supposed to lose.
Yeah,
Um, but again, I feel like it's something that they can build off of. That if
without a doubt.
if
Yeah,
they can tweak it a little bit, I think it could be a really cool inclusion in the game. Island expeditions, I love.
I love them.
I think they're
About
really
the only
cool.
thing I still do.
Yeah, my issue with island expeditions is actually the fact that WoW with the Blizzard uh, changed island expeditions to be less explory and more grindable because it was the best way to get Azerite power, and which was a system to kind of increase your power at max level for anybody that hasn't played BFA. Um, but it was the best way to farm it, and you'd have to run a lot of them if you were like a mythic raider. And so Blizzard heard all
Just to
these
say competitive.
exactly. Um, and so Blizzard took all these complaints from mythic raiders, competitive raiders, and so they dumbed down island expeditions. So instead of finding specific rares that could drop items, they just made it so, it doesn't matter what you kill. Just kill everything as fast as you can.
Hmm.
And I would have, I preferred it the prior way. I preferred it where it was more of an exploration thing than just go in and blow everything but the basilisks up because those take too long to kill. Like,
God, I hate the basilisk.
yeah, but I really liked Island Expeditions, and I think
I
it
will
was a
say
great
they should have
addition.
had PvP talents in Island Expeditions. I
Yeah,
hate that. So annoying.
that would have been. I mean, it would have made more sense because you're kind of battling the other faction,
Hmm.
bots and stuff. But it was good, and I think the fact that those bots have like an improved AI, you still stomped them every time you fought them, but it made
Sure.
it feel better because they
Yeah,
acted
you
more
actually had to
like
pop up
players.
your cooldowns,
Yeah.
and I mean, shit, we played one earlier today where I don't even know what happened to that guy. Like he kept on I think it was supposed to be a rogue or something. We just kept on almost killing him, then he would just disappear, or
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
it actually was fun, and it was actually like, wow, I could if I don't take this seriously, I they might actually kill me,
Yeah.
and that would be super embarrassing to everyone else who's just like, wow, this guy just lost to a
To
NPC alliance player.
yeah. No, I really liked Island Expeditions. I like almost everything. A lot of complaints came about from this expansion from the Azurite armor system, which,
Yeah.
it's not as good as the artifacts, but I think people will forget about that in time and
And I
look
think
to
it was
their
a good idea.
experience. Yeah.
It was a good way to force people to keep playing if you are competitive, that you do need to keep on getting Azurite to really stay competitive.
Hmm.
Um, it does feel weird though, like if you do time walking and you get a sick shoulder piece that's better than what you have, but it's like, oh well, I lose a bunch of Azurite powers by doing this, so I kind of have to stick with this thing, even though it's lower item level, just because the time walking piece doesn't give me Azurite ability, or
Yeah,
those
that's
little
true.
buffs.
Yeah.
Which I guess you could say the same thing about artifact and
And weapons,
weapons.
yeah. But no,
Yeah,
no,
but I think weapons are easier where it's one or two items as opposed to Azurite, which I
three
think is
or
three
four
items, right?
technically, yeah. Yeah,
No,
no,
yeah, four.
it's I get the issues with Azurite armor. I just feel like over time people will enjoy the story and the leveling and the world of Battle for Azeroth more than they disliked Azurite armor. And I loved the ideas of the capital cities for this expansion. Borealis and Zandalar,
Oh, yeah.
they were real cities. And I don't think Blizzard
Beautiful.
will ever do that again because it
Why do
was
you say
not
that?
convenient. Because it was a pain in the butt if you didn't have flying at the beginning of the expansion to go from
Yes.
the Great Seal in Zuldazar and run, or Dazar Alor, and run all the way to the port to do some quests.
Well,
Like,
I will say I actually like that because I feel like too often in World of Warcraft, every single player has the same Hearthstone location. Where
yeah,
I felt like this one, you could actually be a little bit more strategic. Like for me, until I got flying, I never really hearthed to Great Seal. I hearthed to uh, Spirit's Welcome, or I forgot what it's called, but there's multiple uh, inns within the city, so you could actually, strategically use your Hearthstone a little bit differently than it's just, oh, I'll port back to where everyone else ports back to.
that's true. I agree with that, but
Maybe that's just me making orange juice or lemonade out of lemons, but
well,
I like.
I will say I liked Dazar Lore. I really liked it. It was a cool city. It was a real city. But a lot of my characters that are max level aren't even like it's hard to try to make a capital city as a player hub if it isn't a player hub. Like you said, you didn't even make the Great Seal your Hearthstone location. It's not the Hearthstone location for half of my max level characters because I don't even bother going there, which is kind of not great if it's supposed to be the capital city of the expansion.
Yeah,
Um,
but you
yeah,
also
it's
have to understand it was also a leveling zone too.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You had to
It
dig
was a
enough to.
Yeah, it was a cool idea, but I don't think they're gonna go so big again.
Yeah.
Um, but I did like it. I really did. Um, yeah, as a whole, I did like this expansion.
I love this expansion. This expansion's actually kept my interest essentially throughout. Like I literally, I within the past few months, I've definitely tapered down a lot more from, I don't really play that much. I maybe do uh, island expeditions every once in a while. Uh, but all in all, it has really done a good job in holding my attention and continuous content. It felt like the uh, patches came pretty regularly.
hmm
So right when I was getting bored with one patch, the next would show up, and it felt right.
hmm
Um,
Yeah,
but yeah,
yeah,
I really like this expansion. It had story implications were huge. It finally started building up second tier faction leaders, where you're
yeah,
not just faction leaders and that's it. And essentially, I mean, it's still weird. The trolls don't really have a defined faction leader yet,
hmm
but now you have Talanji, Rokan's definitely more involved now. Uh, Sparky Boy, or whatever the hell his
Zappy
name
Boy,
is, Zappy
Zakan,
Boy.
yeah,
It's I like that they're kind of bringing in a new tier of leaders who are, or maybe hero or leaders aren't the right word, but maybe heroes. Like
yeah,
they're people like Rexar or Varrock that you can kind of look up to and really respect and enjoy doing quests for.
and I'm glad they're doing that because Blizzard can push all the storylines that they want, but they have to build new characters too, and I think
Yeah.
they did that really well in this expansion. Um, yeah, I'm very happy with how this expansion turned out. Even if a lot of people are saying it's the worst expansion ever, even worse than Warlords of Draenor and
It's
Cataclysm and
just
those.
ridiculous.
Yeah, it's that recency bias. You think the most recent thing is the best or the worst. There's no in between.
Yeah, I feel like this really brought together a lot of cool things, and I think it's going to lead to a lot of cool things in Shadowlands.
Hmm. Well, that was an
Uh,
excellent segue. What
yeah,
what are you looking for in Shadowlands? Do you feel like it's from what you've seen building up in BFA and, just the different stuff that you've heard, how are you thinking Shadowlands is going to turn out? And what do you think it needs to deliver on to be good?
so Torghast seems sick. It
Mhm.
seems like Island Expedition's taken so much further
Mhm.
and potentially way more engaging,
Mhm.
where it's, essentially you do Island Expeditions for transmogs, mounts, and Azerite power. It seems like Torghast might actually be a good way to get good gear and like do a lot of things. Uh, I just like how it seems kind of very central.
Mhm.
I would really like to see something going on with Vol'jin. I thought they were going to bring up him becoming maybe the Loa of the Horde or the Loa of the War Chiefs or something like that. In this expansion, they didn't do it, but like there are several parts, like when Talanji became the queen or whatever, where Vol'jin's ghost pops up in the
Yeah.
background.
And you have the whole quest line where you go get Vol'jin's ashes and you
I'm
go
still carrying around this fool's ashes.
yeah.
I'm a little bit angry they didn't do more. That it's the troll expansion.
Mhm.
Vol'jin should have been involved more. But I really hope that they're holding off for Shadowlands. That's theoretically where he should be. Um, so it'd be cool to see more of Boam Samdi too. He
Yeah,
was such a fun
absolutely.
character.
Yeah.
I would really love to see more of him. And I like the again bringing more diversity or more of a way to develop your character's background and personal lore
Mhm.
of picking between the four factions. It's like Aldor and Scryer, but taken to the extreme.
Yeah.
I still have no clue which one I'm going to do as a shaman. I don't feel drawn to any of them,
Hmm.
but it's going to be fun either way.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you on all
And
the
I really
points.
hope they have a really, really, really good explanation for Sylvanas. Because if it's just another basic horde leader that they've built up for multiple expansions just goes bad,
Hmm.
I'm gonna be pissed. Because
Yeah.
I right now as it stands, I'm kind of pissed how things turned out with Sylvanas.
Hmm.
Of she really at parts of the expansion seemed like she was building into a pretty cool leader. Like obviously not the nicest person, but like it's kind of what you need for a horde leader is kind of very edgy, maybe.
Hmm.
Uh, so they need to do some very good writing to fix that, in my mind.
Mm. So, uh, you've seen the Bastion Afterlife's cinematic kind of
For
animation
Uther.
thing. Yeah. Uh, do you think Arthas is going to be involved in this expansion, or do you feel like you'll be let down if he isn't involved in some
I would
way?
definitely be left down if he isn't involved,
Okay.
without it.
So I agree. I feel like that cinematic set up Arthas really well to be involved, but they need to do so carefully. Because if they just do another, oh, Arthas was actually right all along, we didn't understand his motives, like do what Illidan they did with Illidan and Legion, I wouldn't like that.
Yeah, that might be too far, but maybe some kind of redemption story would be cool.
Yeah, they've my whole thing is they have to tread carefully with that because they ended on Arthas very. I think they on a high note. We beat him. There is only darkness for me. It was just perfect how they ended it.
Yeah.
Illidan was not perfect how they ended it. So them bringing him back and kind of
In Burning Crusade,
yeah,
it wasn't perfect.
yeah, in
Okay,
Burning
yeah. And then
Crusade,
they
and when they brought him back in Legion, it just worked. I don't feel the need that they need to bring back Arthas. Um, so if
no,
they
it
do dig
definitely
up
needs to
that
be.
grave, it has to be worth it. Is all
Yeah.
I'm saying. Um, but yeah, besides that, I'm totally on board with everything. Torghast seems awesome. We've already kind of gone over it. We both love zones or area portions of zones where we definitely feel unwanted and kind of slowly being pushed out. And the Maw seems awesome for that.
Yeah.
Like I'm totally okay with a zone that beats me up and spits me out. Um, it's cool. It seems really cool. I just I'm also worried that it could turn out a little corny or a little hokey if we see too many dead heroes. Like if it becomes
Sure.
kind of like Draenor where oh we see, Ner'zhul, but Ner'zhul gets killed off at the end of a dungeon. But he's actually the Lich King in our world. Like you can't
Yeah.
cheapen characters in Shadow. Like they can. I mean, like it's possible for them to, but if they do, it will reflect very poorly on the expansion. Uther
Yeah.
seems really cool because there seems like there's conflict within him. Where he died as a paragon of the light, and yet there's something pulling at him in like vengeance. Like there's a darkness within him that almost wasn't there when he was alive. Which okay, that's
Yeah.
really cool. That's an awesome story to go under. Um,
Yeah. Actually, interesting development.
yeah, if they just like, oh look, there's Varian. Hi, Varian. And he's like, oh hi, Anduin, you've turned into such a good king. Like no, no. Like if Varian died in an awesome way, if we see everyone that has died in like if we see people that die, it cheapens their death because it's not
Yeah.
a final goodbye.
Yeah, you can't overdo it. I
Yeah,
think within moderation it would be cool, but I definitely agree overdoing it would be cheapen all the other experiences.
yeah, yeah. But it seems like it's wrapping up to the end. So, do you want to name your ranking of the expansions?
I don't know if I even could.
I can go first if you want.
Sure.
Okay, so I'll start from the bottom. Number seven, for me personally, is Cataclysm. Um, the one right above it, number six, is Warlords of Draenor, which most people would put at number seven. But I would say that both expansions were huge leaps of faith. They were monumental tasks. They were risks that were taken by the development team that didn't necessarily pan out amazingly.
Hmm.
However, I had a lot of fun leveling through Warlords of Draenor, and I
Yeah.
can't say the same for Cataclysm. And at the very base level, every expansion is fun to level through. So when you have trouble accomplishing that, it's kind of impossible for me to put you any higher than the bottom.
Without a doubt, I think Cataclysm would probably be the lowest
Yeah.
for me as well.
Um, so I have Cataclysm, Warlords of Draenor, Burning Crusade as number five. Number four is Battle for Azeroth. Number three is Mists of Pandaria.
Wow, so
Two,
Mists of Pandaria above Battle for Azeroth. Okay.
yeah, they're both pretty close. I consider my bottom three, the
Hmm.
Burning Crusade, Warlords of Draenor, and Cataclysm, as like the tier three. They're all pretty close. And then there's a
Hmm.
pretty substantial jump to Battle for Azeroth and Mists of
Sure.
Pandaria. They're both really good. And then there's this another substantial jump to number two, which is Wrath of the Lich King.
Yeah.
And then number one is Legion. Because if I take
Yeah, I
all
mean,
of my nostalgia and childhood playing days out of Wrath of the Lich King, it's still an incredible expansion, but I think Legion is better across the board.
yeah. If I were to rank them, I probably wouldn't do it too differently. I would do probably from top to bottom, so doing the opposite of you. I'd probably do Legion, Battle for Azeroth.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm
That
telling you, I
high.
really like Battle of Azeroth. I've liked all the most of the dungeons. I've liked most of the raids. Leveling was so fun, and I just really liked what they did with the story. It was really a return to faction conflict, huge changes like the loss of the capitals, but not necessarily with all the drawbacks like you have with Cataclysm, where it's not much as much of a risk, but it's still kind of a lot of the same effect.
Hmm.
Um, so Legion, Battle for Azeroth, Wrath, Mists.
This is where I
Maybe
had
Burning
trouble with it
Crusade
too.
and Draenor.
Burning
Burning
Crusade, then
Crusade,
Draenor.
yeah, because I didn't. Draenor was fun, but it just was too repetitive. Whereas Burning Crusade, well, I'll say it like this: I could go back and do Burning Crusade and probably still have fun.
Hmm.
I would struggle to do go back and do
Warlords of Draenor.
Warlords of Draenor. I think
Yeah.
I would really. I don't think I could make it through it again.
Yeah, I that makes sense to me. I mean, I have the same bottom three, but it took me a long time to kind of wrestle with what should be the bottom. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, yeah, our lists are pretty similar, except Battle for Azeroth was substantially higher for you.
yeah.
Um, and I think honestly, as time goes by, it'll probably climb for me too.
I think a lot of it too is just the amount of time I put into it.
That's true. Yeah.
Um, Whereas I played a lot of Battle for Azeroth, whereas I didn't play as much Mists or Draenor. Did I even include Cataclysm in my
You
my
put it at
list?
the bottom at the very beginning.
Okay.
Would it be
Yeah.
above Warlords of Draenor, or would it be below?
I mean, really tied.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to put one above the other. Kata objectively is bad, but again, it's just one of those expansions I actually played a lot of for
Hmm.
whatever reason.
Yeah, it
So
was the
I,
first time you
I
hit
just
max level.
yeah, so it would just kind of has a special place in my heart, but objectively, Draenor is probably better.
Hmm. All right. Well, is there any other final thoughts you want to give on a World of Warcraft expansion?
No, I think that about wraps it up.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. If you guys, listeners, have any differences, if you think our order of ranking is just completely bonkers, then give us your lists. Let us know what you think. If you think we're both crazy for thinking Battle for Azeroth is that great, or that Cataclysm is worse than Draenor, let us know too. We'd love to hear what you have to say.
Bring it.
Have a great night.